I was introduced to Christine on a frosty cold December morning. She was sitting in her easy chair in her tastefully decorated living room, which was located on the fifth floor of a senior high-rise complex in downtown Sacramento. And she was a mess. Christine disappeared inside a huge cardigan as she hugged her shoulders while staring at a Ralph Lauren blanket covering her thin legs. She was in home hospice, waiting for the ravages of 40 years of smoking cigarettes to take its ultimate toll on her now emaciated 70-year-old body. That day, this once successful businesswoman needed help. And that's where I came in. I was an award-winning volunteer in the Sacramento Senior Companion Program, operated by the County of Sacramento's Senior and Adult Services. We volunteers helped seniors by providing them free weekly transportation to wherever they needed to go. Along the way, we mixed in a blend of humor, fun, compassion, and discovery, while sharing important information about elder care and elder abuse. My first impression of Christine was that she was not a happy camper. She appeared resigned to sitting out the last few months of her life in her comfortable home, surrounded by her eclectic collection of art and family heirlooms. I sensed that she no longer had a desire to step outside of her cocoon. But she did need to eat and had agreed to allow a senior companion volunteer to provide transportation once a week for her grocery shopping. So here was Christine, staring at her legs as she mumbled a hello when we were introduced, and then one answered my questions as I tried to gauge her interest. I felt a reluctant tolerance, so I backed off. Then Linda, the charismatic director of a senior nonprofit that was responsible for hosting this visit, suggested that we fill out the necessary paperwork. Christine and I agreed to meet every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and that I would call her the night before to remind her. I called Christine the following Monday evening and fumbled through her special landline phone, which printed out my side of the conversation, because Christine, on top of everything else, suffered an acute hearing loss. Now, I had never used one of those phones before, so it was a learning experience for me. She mumbled her schedule for my pending visit. She obviously was feeling very dark, so I kept the conversation brief. Now, the next day, I arrived on time and with a cheery disposition. Christine might be down on life, but I'm not. I've enjoyed an extraordinary life, and it just keeps getting better. My attitude with Christine was that it was time for a little sunshine in her life, and I was going to be the one to bring it. Time for her to put on her sunglasses. But first, she needed to step outside for a cigarette. Now, I know cigarettes are what got her into this deadly predicament, but I decided that at this late date, she can't do any more harm, so why deny her what obviously brings her pleasure? But I did stand upwind from her as she smoked her cigarette. Then once in my car, she wanted to go directly to Safeway for grocery shopping, and then right back home. I pointed out that it was a beautiful sunny day and that we could take a little drive before shopping, but she insisted on only the quick trip for groceries. I decided to let her have her way this time. Let her get comfortable with me before I turn up the fun factor. The following week started out exactly the same. Mumbled phone call the night before and a quick cigarette before climbing into my car. But then I flipped the switch. The previous week, I had coaxed out of Christine the fact that she had been an accomplished, lifelong athlete before the cancer. So when she was settled in the car, I asked her if she minded my making a quick stop before the grocery store. I mentioned that I play bocce, and that if I didn't add my name to a list of participants for an upcoming club tournament, I would be left out. Today was the deadline. I told her the club, the East Portal Bocce Club, was on the way to Safeway and that she could wait in the car while I registered. She agreed, and we headed to East Sacramento. On the way, I played my hole card and told her tales about my 30 years as an international tour guide and the two very innovative and highly successful sightseeing companies I created and operated, one of which evolved into one of the most famous sightseeing companies in the world, Gray Line of San Francisco. No one can resist those stories, and I wanted to distract her because we were going 30 blocks past her grocery store, and I didn't want her complaining about the long detour. My stories kept her occupied until we were in the fabulous 40s, the beautiful residential neighborhood of stately homes in East Sacramento that was featured in the outstanding Sacramento-based Academy Award-nominated movie Lady Bird. I started pointing out some of the unique features of the homes we were driving past, and Christine sat up straighter and joined in the conversation. I'm thinking, great, I'll save this for another day. We pulled up to the bocce club, and I started to climb out, but stopped. I turned and asked her if she had ever seen a bocce court. She said no, and I said, well, since we're here, how about joining me for a quick look-see? She could see that the club gate was less than 30 feet away, so she couldn't use distance as an excuse, and besides, she was just a little bit curious about bocce. So she reluctantly agreed. Once inside the open-aired club, I feigned frustration that I couldn't find what was, in actuality, an imaginary list. When I glanced at Christine, I noticed her eyeing the 5 bocce courts with interest. I mentioned that the ancient Egyptian pyramids had 5,000-year-old hieroglyphics on their walls depicting Egyptians playing bocce. This game was one of the oldest known to man. I then showed her a picture on my phone and told her that I was introduced to bocce at the age of 5 while living in Trieste, Italy, when my father, in coat and tie, played a game with some local bocce conoscenti. That was the first time I saw her eyes come alive, so I pressed on. Hey, let me show you what a bocce ball looks like. I stepped onto a court. Each court has a set of bocce balls in a secure box with a combination lock. The combination numbers are known to the club members. I opened a box, lifted out a red bocce ball, and handed it to her. She noted that it wasn't that heavy, so I started explaining some of the simple rules of the game. I then pulled out the Polino, the small ball used as the target ball, and traded it for the red ball that she was holding. I asked her to repeat the name of the Polino, and after 3 tries, she pronounced it correctly. I then told her to roll the Polino down the court past the first white line. It took her 4 tries, but she finally succeeded in getting it past that line. Great, I said, handing the red ball back to her. Now roll this ball down the court and see how close you can get to the Polino. She managed a feeble roll, coming up 30 feet short. Okay, I said, now watch me. I grabbed a green ball and then slightly exaggerated, positioning myself for my roll. I knew that she was studying me. I rolled and came within an inch of the Polino. I told her I had point because I was closest to the Polino and that it was her role to see if she could get closer. Give me another ball, she demanded. Wow, I'm thinking, a real spark. I handed her another red ball, and this time she mimicked my stance and rolled a much better ball, going 2 feet past the Polino. I told her that I still had point and that she had to roll again. This time, the adrenaline kicked in and her ball rolled 7 feet too long. It was still her roll, and I handed her her last red ball. She rolled, hit the Polino, and when both balls stopped rolling, they were an inch apart. She turned to me beaming. She had point and had kicked some serious booty with that roll. Christine was feeling it. The hook was set, so it was time to shut it down. Now that she had a taste, I pulled back with a promise to revisit at a later date. We had shopping to do, and I didn't want to tire her out. I'm not tired, she protested, but I insisted. I promised a longer visit next time. She was a different Christine as we made our way to the grocery store. She was animated and conversant, and I knew that my ruse had paid off. That ancient game had rekindled her joie de vivre. The following week when I called, she asked if we could again play a little bocce before shopping, and I readily agreed. By our fourth phone call, Christine was yelling into the phone, Thomas! Tomorrow! I want to play bocce, but first I need to stop by Macy's and spend some of the store credit that's been sitting there for the last 6 months. And I called my old athletic club and talked them into allowing me swimming privileges. Hospice patients don't get to swim, but I got my doctor's approval and then sweet-talked them into complying. So I'm going to start swimming again. Oh, and I want to go to the farmer's market and say hi to some of my old friends. There was a lot more that changed in Christine's life, but you get the picture. She was reborn. Every week, we would start with bocce. Pretty soon, the club members knew her name, and because of her enthusiasm for the sport, started calling her BocceQueen. The day she beat me in bocce, her feet never touched the ground. You couldn't wipe that smile off her face. Man, what a fabulous feeling for both of us. What started out as, at most, a 2-month prognosis lasted 13 months. Don't you just love the power of the human spirit and the human mind? Now, during that time, Christine and I formed a lasting friendship. Our days together sometimes stretched 5 or 6 hours when she was feeling good. On our bad days, we always got in a couple of hours. Well, her cancer eventually beat her, but I know that the last year of her life was one of her most memorable. It had turned out to be a lot better than she had ever expected. She rode it hard to the very end. And me? It's been a few years, but I still smile when I think of Christine, the bocce queen.